Hey guys, it's Sean from Lapavoni Mac here. I thought I'd go ahead and do a new video, another snowblower video. Here is a customer's Ariens Pro 26. This is a 10 horsepower model, 10 horse Briggs, 26-inch bucket. What we're going to be doing today is showing you how to replace a drive friction disc, like so. One of these. I'm going to show you how to disassemble the underside of these, how to take the shafts out, and how to replace these properly. This is a very regular maintenance and wear item on snowblowers. You think about how much wear they get every year. There's a lot of wear and tear on them, so it's just a casual part that needs to be replaced every few years or so to maintain optimum drive performance on your machine. When we get down there, I'll also explain exactly how the system works and how friction discs work in a drive system on a snowblower. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is flip your snowblower up on the tub like this. This is a very stable way to gain access to the bottom of the snowblower. And if you put a seat here, it makes everything right at eye level, right at an easy working height if you're just kind of sitting down like this in front. So this is the way that I like to work on them. There's no worry about engine oil getting into the head or into the carburetor because you're tilting it back against the back of the crankcase halves. So there's no oil that's going to run into the head. So you prevent any kind of hydro-locking scenario by leaving it like this, which is nice. First thing we're going to want to do is remove this bottom cover. There's 2 3/8 here, and there's 2 3/8 here, and there's 2 3/8 here and here. So there's 6 bolts total. I'm gonna go ahead and remove those, pull the cover off, and then we'll see what's inside. So now you can see we have the belly pan opened up. The way this works is there's a belt that drives this pulley here, and this is spinning all the time when the engine is running. This is connected directly by belt to a pulley up on the output shaft of the engine. So this is spinning all the time. This disc, if you can see in there, has some free play. This one sits about a little over 1/8 of an inch up above the surface of this pulley, which you can see is kind of polished from the wear. When you engage the handle on the handlebars and squeeze it down, that draws this pulley that's spinning all the time up onto this drive disc, which makes contact. When it makes contact with the spinning pulley, it starts spinning. It spins a gear that's on this spline shaft here, which is connected to a chain, which is connected to another gear here, which is on the shaft, a separate jack shaft, which has a gear, which then in turn goes down to this larger ring gear that is splined onto the axle shaft between the wheels here, and it spins like that. So the way that we're gonna get this disc off is there's 3 3/8 on a bearing cap on this side as well as the other side, and we need to remove those so that we can move this axle or this shaft that the drive disc slides on, and then we can pull these cotter pins out on the side, and we can unbolt the drive disc from the shifter assembly, which rides in this fork, which moves across this shaft when you change gears. Depending on where this friction disc sits on this pulley, you get more speed or you get reverse. This side would be reverse, this side would be forward, and the farther out it goes, the faster it spins. So we're going to have to unbolt it directly from the shift assembly, slide this shaft outwards. Probably going to have to remove a wheel so that we can get the shaft out far enough. Maybe not. We might be able to get around that, because all we have to do is slide this off the shaft enough to slip it out. And then we can put the new one on. You can see how shiny this is. This is glazed from wear. This isn't completely worn out yet, but this machine is probably 10 years old or so, and these do wear out over time. They're just a maintenance item. You think about all the wear that they have on them every year. They do tend to wear out quickly. So that can cause drivability issues, slipping when under a load, or if they get wet. So I'm going to show you how to replace that, and I'm also going to show you, after we get the new one on, I'll show you how to adjust your drive cable, which is right here. You can see that's actuating that pulley there when I pull on it. I'll show you how to adjust that so that you have minimal open space between the friction disc and the pulley, so that you can have a good solid connection between the disc and the pulley when you pull down on that handle. So let's go ahead and take these bearing caps off each side, and I'll take these cotter pins out so that I can slide this shaft out, and we'll go from there. As you can see, I got this one side off already. Just removed the bearing cap, and the bearings slid right off the end of the axle. They're not pressed fit or anything. They just slide right off. If yours is a little older or a little rustier, you might have to use a big screwdriver or pry bar to pry it off, just one on either side, and work it off, but it should come pretty easily. So before we remove the other side completely, what you're going to want to do is pull the handle down. I zip tied mine because I'm working by myself and I couldn't find a bungee cord. But you want to hold that down so that there's pressure on this wheel. And before we remove the shaft, because there would be a lot of slop in it, we're going to want to remove these 3 bolts that hold this friction disc to the shift assembly. They are a Torx bit head. They're T40 Torx. So we're going to go ahead and break these free, and all you got to do is get them loose, so you can get them off with your fingers, and then you can continue to remove the shaft as long as they're loose enough that you can take them right off afterwards. So what I ended up having to do here, after I got this bearing cap off, I wasn't able to get that bearing off. That's stuck on that side of the shaft for some reason. I tried pounding on the shaft and tried to push the bearing off, and it would not budge. So in order to get the chain off, you're supposed to be able to take that bearing off, and this sprocket here on this spline shaft slides all the way off, and you can pull the shaft out of it, and that gives you access to getting the chain off, because you have to remove the chain to be able to slide the shaft that the friction disc rides on out enough to pull the disc out. So what I ended up having to do was pull the circlip on this shaft that the main gear rides on, the one that's driven by the chain, which then in turn drives the ring gear on the drive axle, so that I could pull the axle out far enough, like this, so that I could tilt it in. It was sitting here. I tilted it in far enough that I could just slide the chain off of the sprocket up here. So now that we have the chain off, and this shaft can move all around, we're going to go ahead and take these Torx bolts out that hold the disc onto the shift assembly. I'm going to take them the rest of the way out, which should be pretty easy. They're all pretty loose now that I loosened them before I removed the bearing caps on the shaft. And then I'll show you how to pull this disc out and throw the new one in. Alright, now I took all those bolts out. You can see the drive disc here, the friction disc. So all I'm going to do is move this shaft a little bit. which gives us access to the disc. You slide the disc right out like that. Not a big deal. This is a genuine Ariens disc that I got from Jack Small Engines. Part number is 1708. Go ahead and slide the new one in. There's some centering tabs on the shift assembly here. It just kind of centers the disc on it. And you can go ahead and throw your bolts back in. So now I'm going to show you, now that I have this all back together down here, I'm going to show you how to adjust this cable. Now I already went ahead and adjusted this a little bit earlier when I was adjusting the amount of tension to have on this disc when I loosened those bolts. And it actually seems perfect right now, actually, where I put it on the old disc. So what you want is for this disc, the new friction disc, not to contact the pulley and while you're spinning it. So you should be able to freewheel this thing, and there should be no resistance like there is right now. This is perfectly acceptable. You want this. You want to spin this by hand, and as you pull on your drive handle right here, you want it to engage not too far from rest position. So you want it nice and close. Mine engages about maybe a fifth or sixth of the way, like that. You can see how it pulls the pulley out, like that. The important thing to know about these is that these cables are sprung, so you can't have too much tension. You really can't, because they'll self-adjust. So like you can see, like this is where as soon as this goes taut, I now am in contact. And the more I pull it, the more the spring grows, like that. So you're not going to hurt anything. This is sprung, but you don't want it to be, you know, 3/4 of the way down when you make contact, because then you're only going to have this much tension, as opposed to now where it starts right here, and I have this much tension on it. So this is going to be a nice firm grip, no slipping. And not as much wear this way either. There's not going to be as much slipping from the disc, between the disc and the pulley there, which means longer pulley life, or a longer friction disc life.